4 outcasts, forbidden from entering the city, watching their nation starve behind closed gates, an enemy army surrounding them. And then they asked the question that changed everything. Why should we sit here until we die? What happened next is the most shocking reversal of fortune in the entire Bible. From outcasts to heroes, from poverty to abundance, from death to life, and it all started with 4 men nobody wanted. The city of Samaria, capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, was under siege by the powerful Aramean Syrian army. King Ben-Hadad of Aram had surrounded the city completely, cutting off all supply routes. No food could come in, no one could leave. The siege had lasted so long that famine had gripped the city with devastating force. The Bible records that a donkey's head, normally worthless, was selling for 80 shekels of silver. A small amount of dove's dung was selling for 5 shekels. People were literally paying fortunes for things nobody would normally consider food. The situation was so desperate that cannibalism had begun. One woman came to the king with a horrific report. She and another woman had made a pact to eat their children to survive. But after eating her son, the other woman had hidden her own son. King Jehoram of Israel, hearing this, tore his robes in anguish. The city was dying from the inside. Starvation was everywhere. Despair filled every home. And outside the walls, the Aramean army waited patiently for the city to surrender or die. Outside the city gate sat 4 men with leprosy. In ancient Israel, leprosy made you ceremonially unclean. You couldn't live inside the city. You couldn't touch others. You couldn't participate in community life. The law required you to live outside the camp, separated from society. These 4 men were already outcasts before the siege began. Now, with the city under siege and starving, they were in an impossible position. Then one of them spoke up. He asked the question that would change the course of an entire nation. Why should we sit here until we die? If we say, we'll go into the city, the famine is there, and we will die there anyway. They won't let us in and there's no food. If we sit here, we die here, slowly, watching both sides. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender to them. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die, but we're going to die anyway. It was brutal logic. They had absolutely nothing to lose. They were already dying. At least this option gave them a chance. At dusk, as darkness began to fall, the 4 lepers made their move. They got up and walked toward the enemy camp. Imagine the scene. 4 men, weakened by leprosy and hunger, walking into the camp of a massive army that had besieged their city. Walking toward soldiers who would normally kill them on sight. Walking toward their potential death, because staying meant certain death. They expected to find soldiers. They expected to surrender and beg for mercy. They expected to either be killed or enslaved. What they found was beyond anything they could have imagined. They reached the edge of the Aramean camp. Silence. No guards challenged them. They walked further. Still silence. They reached the first tent and looked inside. Food, abundant food, silver, gold, clothes, everything the starving city desperately needed. But no soldiers. They went to another tent. Same thing. Supplies, treasures, provisions, but no people. Then another tent and another. The entire camp was abandoned. A massive army had simply vanished, leaving everything behind. What had happened? God's divine intervention. Unknown to the 4 lepers, God had performed an extraordinary miracle. At the exact moment they decided to walk toward the camp, the Lord caused the Aramean army to hear the sound of a massive force approaching. Chariots, horses, and a great army. The 4 outcasts had stumbled into the answer to an entire nation's prayers. The 4 lepers could hardly believe what they were seeing. They entered one tent and ate and drank. They took silver, gold, and clothes and went off and hid them. Then they returned and entered another tent, took more treasures and hid those too. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, they ate until they were full. For the first time in their lives as outcasts, they had wealth. They went from tent to tent, feasting and collecting treasures, from beggars to wealthy men in a single evening. But then, in the middle of their celebration, one of them spoke up. What we're doing is not right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let's go at once and report this to the royal palace. Think about the moral courage in this moment. These men had every reason to hate the city that had rejected them. They had been outcasts, forbidden, forgotten. The city had shown them no mercy when they were starving. Now they had more food and wealth than they could carry. They could have stayed silent. They could have kept the treasures for themselves. They could have taken revenge for years of rejection. But they didn't. They recognized that keeping this good news to themselves would be wrong. Despite their treatment, they chose to save the city that had excluded them. So they went back. They called out to the city gatekeepers. We went into the Aramean camp, and no one was there. Not a sound of anyone, only tethered horses and donkeys, and the tents left just as they were. The gatekeepers shouted the news, and word reached the royal palace. The king got up in the night. His response reveals how desperate and paranoid the siege had made him. I will tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know we are starving, so they have left the camp to hide in the countryside, thinking, they will surely come out and then we will take them alive and get into the city. He suspected a trap. It seemed too good to be true. The enemy wouldn't just abandon everything. But one of his officers spoke up. Have some men take 5 of the horses that are left in the city. Their plight will be like that of all the Israelites left here. Yes, they will only be like all these Israelites who are doomed. So let us send them to find out what happened. His belief, the horses are going to die anyway from starvation. The men are going to die anyway. Let's send them to check. We have nothing to lose. They selected 2 chariots with horses, and the king sent them after the Aramean army with the command, go and find out what has happened. The scouts followed the trail all the way to the Jordan River. The entire road was strewn with clothing and equipment the Arameans had thrown away in their headlong flight. The scouts returned and reported to the king, it's all true. The camp is abandoned. The Arameans have fled. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. The Bible records the stunning economic reversal. A sea of the finest flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seas of barley sold for a shekel, as the Lord had said. Remember what things had cost during the famine? A donkey's head for 80 shekels. Now a massive amount of the finest flour cost only 1 shekel, from impossible inflation to radical abundance in a single day. The starving city became wealthy overnight, from famine to feast, from death to abundance, from siege to salvation. And it all started because 4 outcasts, 4 men nobody wanted, 4 lepers sitting at a gate asked, why should we sit here until we die? Their desperation became the nation's deliverance. Their risk became everyone's reward. Their willingness to move toward uncertainty led to a miracle they never saw coming.